Hi, I'm Andrea Gigline, and thank you so much for being with us today. Today is my usual sidekick, Sharon Adishak, and I've got to tell you, before I tell you what even her name is, I'm going to tell you how I met her. So just take a good look for those of you who are watching this on the webcast. So in our last show, I admitted that I viewed Botox as like my generation's version of personal maintenance items. Well, I met our guest today, Caitlin Kellogg, at a Botox party. And trust me, she was not a participant. She was just coming to be nice.
Yes, it was still a good time, I think.
Yes. And over cocktails, we had the opportunity to be talking about a lot of generational things, and someone just made mention of the fact that Caitlin had been on Face the Nation. As you know, we film in Las Vegas, and Las Vegas had the honor of having one of the last presidential debate. So that caught my attention, and we had a conversation about it, and I quickly found out a lot of things about her. But before we get to there, I need Caitlin to introduce herself, and I said her name is Caitlin Kellogg. So tell us about your last name, Caitlin.
Okay, so my last name is Caitlin Kellogg, and 2 L's, 2 G's, double good.
Double good. Yes, we got that.
So when I was growing up in elementary and middle school, a lot of people referred to me by my last name because it is rather catchy, but it was also grounds for ridicule.
Yes.
Lots of jokes, lots of like funny little pickup lines that the 7th grade boys would say. But when I was growing up, they would send the company, the Kellogg company, would send me like a box, and it had all of these like spoons and bowls and scarves and like a Tony the Tiger picture, and it had like Tony holding up a sign that said like, "I love Caitlin Kellogg." So
Yes!
it's been a unique experience
I have
bearing
to say,
the name.
Yes, in those exercises that you would do at, like, say, a Girl Nation type program,
Yeah,
which
right.
is something we talked about. You know, tell us something someone would not know about you.
Yeah.
That has got
Big.
to win. That definitely
Exactly.
has got to win. Well, the real reason that I wanted you here today, we've been having an ongoing conversation with lots of different topics, but started because Sharon and I, who have worked together in the past, were talking about a major transition she's going to be having, or a ritual, something in its birthdays. And she's 6 months away from having a major birthday.
50.
Happy
50,
early birthday.
yes. And in the conversations with you, I realized, we have here today representation of three generations. And
Absolutely.
with Sharon's daughter, we actually have a 4th one. So we've got the millennials, I am a boomer, and you're
an X.
You're an X.
And my daughter will be Z.
Yes, we've got all these categories.
Right.
So we get to experience things. And in positive psychology, one of the interesting original setups of the science when they were teaching it to us was that people generally go through, as far as when are you the most satisfied, they would find that the pleasant life, which is, we're just out having a good time. When I took the class, they used Pamela Anderson as the example. I would now say, what you think when the word Kardashian may come, that would be that kind of a lifestyle. Then there was the good life, where, you're doing a bit of good, you're doing work that you like, but you're enjoying the harvest of what you've done. And then there was the last one, which was the meaningful life. And that's actually, when it was taught, it wasn't as though it was generational that this would happen, but there was a way that you thought, the older you got, the more you strove towards meaning. And in my work, what I've really been finding is that millennials are coming into the workforce, putting a demand for meaning that never existed, definitely in my generation. We cared about how much we were going to get paid. I was the first set of people that were getting promoted. What was the career path? We cared about those things. I actually remember when I started studying this work, laughing when I was asked to look at the quote-unquote softer side of these types of things.
Right.
You're coming into the workforce in a very different way.
Yes, absolutely.
So let's start there.
Okay.
Tell us first what you studied in college.
I studied communications and political science, and it was quite an adventure to kind of get there because, you graduate high school and in one moment you're, raising your hand asking to go to, the bathroom, and then the next moment they throw you into the college sphere and you're like, oh, now I have to figure out what I'm going to do for the rest of my life? Oh, okay, sure. Yeah, I'll do that real quick.
Got nothing else to do this week. Yep.
So I eventually found that my passions and my strengths lined with communications and political science. Both subject areas are something I'm very passionate about. And I really enjoyed the individuals who are also in my major, so it made the experience that much more positive.
Where did you go to school?
Went to St. Mary's College of California up in Moraga, which is east of San Francisco by about 20 miles.
Okay.
Yeah.
Now, I'll tell you the other part. I didn't know about Tony the Tiger until Caitlin showed up. Kate showed up here today. But there was a piece that actually, in addition to her being a millennial, and what came out of our conversations was that she had been part of that focus group after the presidential elections. And I was intrigued because I went and watched the clip, which I would suggest you all do, and I was very impressed.
Thank you.
On how you positioned your responses.
Thank you.
Tell us where that came from.
Basically, it's training.
Right.
Because I was on the collegiate debate team at St. Mary's, and I also did mock trial and debate in high school. So when I was making like my college journey, a lot had to do with scholarship, and I had a collegiate debate scholarship to St. Mary's, so I was like, oh, this is going to be great. I love this stuff.
Right.
So essentially what you learn in debate is obviously how to formulate educated and eloquent thoughts. And I'd had rigorous practice in that, especially in college, because I was in parliamentary debate, and you would do 6 preliminary rounds discussing domestic and foreign policy. And if you didn't truly understand what was going on and couldn't articulate the issue in a poignant way, then you wouldn't win, and I obviously wouldn't have qualified for a scholarship. Right. So essentially, when it all comes down to the root of what I learned was how to be passionate, yet poised, and just to be able to collect a thought on the drop of a dime.
Right.
And that's incredibly important, because oftentimes when you're sitting around a table or you're at work and you're like, okay, all of these ideas are being thrown my way, like, how do I respond? That training really helped me be able to formulate a great answer or a solution or, an idea that could potentially drive whatever I'm doing forward.
Right. So I heard something very interesting. You made part of your choice about college because of scholarships.
Absolutely.
What if, think back for a moment.
Okay.
What if you didn't get a debate scholarship? Would you have, at that point in life, what would have driven you?
To go to college?
Yeah.
Oh my goodness. Well, I think from a very young age, well, actually in 5th grade, I had my first male teacher. And I can't say he was the most upstanding gentleman I had ever met.
No, you went to Catholic school.
I did. I
Okay.
did go to Catholic school. And that was 5th grade was kind of like the turning point where I was like, okay, like I'm confident in who I am, like just like in that transition in life where you're moving from like, okay, I know I'm going to go to middle school next year. So I kind of had this like newfound confidence, and I was like, you know what? I want to be the first female president of the United States of America. So and yeah, and that was my whole like campaign that year. And so I guess it was from that moment, it was like I knew I was just like a driven person. I was like, I want to make a difference in the world, whether that's president of the United States or in some way using my talents or whatever I can give to the people I care about, or at a local level or at a national level or an international level. Like I knew I just had this fire.
Right.
Like I could feel it in here. That was like, okay, I have to do something. I have to leave this world better than I found it.
So I will tell you, in 5th grade, what were you thinking about?
I was not thinking that at all. I was thinking, what's for lunch? Not about changing the world.
And
but I love
that speaks to a difference.
Right.
Now, knowing what I know about human behavior and how people develop, there is a uniqueness around some individuals, and clearly I had seen it in you.
Oh, thank you.
When there is that movie that I always talk about where I think it was Willis, what's his first name?
Bruce Willis?
Bruce Willis, and the little boy says, "I see dead people."
Success.
Oh, yeah.
Right.
Okay, I see success. I actually have had the privilege.
I like it.
I do.
You do?
I've had the privilege of, especially with young people, there are certain attributes that they just bubble up naturally. And sometimes they're going against what they've been taught.
Right.
Sometimes it just comes out of nowhere. You have that moment of opening.
Right.
For me, I wasn't thinking, not only would I not have been thinking of being president of the United States then, I don't clearly ever want to be president of the United States even now. That's like not a goal. But did I want to own something? I was the person who would create the Monkeys fan club.
Right.
I would be the person, if I was selling Girl Scout cookies, who wanted to sell the most cookies. Like, there were things.
Right.
So there are those moments. The difference is we can have those moments. We may have had those moments, and there wasn't necessarily a platform for encouragement. You stepped into, and this is generational. You stepped into can you think about what year it would have been that you would have been in 5th grade? 10 years ago?
10 years ago.
10 years ago. Okay, so 06.
No, it would have been a little bit before
For
that.
that, okay.
Let's see. Oh my goodness.
You're 10 years old in 5th grade, I think.
Yeah.
10
So I'm
years old.
25 right now.
Okay, okay, so it would be around 2000 or so.
Right,
Okay,
absolutely.
2000, 2002. So you were really, so 9/11 had occurred, you were aware of that?
Yes, I was in 2nd grade when 9/11.
Okay.
So add 3
All right,
years and
there
I'm
you
in
go,
5th grade.
there you go.
So there we go.
By that time, in the as we turned into the 2000s, the expectation, we have nowhere defined roles, but the breakdown of those roles was really clear.
Yes.
And your
Especially
daughter was
after
born.
9/11. She was born 2003.
Yeah.
Oh, wow.
So
Okay.
just about that same, like you come in, and I remembered someone saying that, there is a whole generation of people who have never touched a rotary dial on a telephone. And there are things.
She's one of them.
Yes! Okay. Now, there's things that you take for granted, and, that's a simple thing.
Right.
But appreciating in each other how things that were so normal for one group of people
Right.
would not be normal. So for you, being inspired to think as grand as being the President of the United States, which at that point in time was still the pinnacle power position
Right.
in the world.
Absolutely.
This is the thing you would want to be. It is a very interesting thing when that just occurs. And that's, when you think of being President of the United States, you're not in 5th grade thinking, I want to control the world.
Right.
It was, how do I help the world? That's
Right.
what I
Make a
heard.
difference.
And that wasn't necessarily happening clearly in my generation.
Or mine.
Right. We had to grow into that. Okay. We grew into that.
Right.
Now, you had the opportunity to step into a transition, i.e. going from high school to college, and we had a conversation about luck a few weeks ago.
Right.
So you did. Now, you had prepared diligently for your debates.
Absolutely.
You were
Absolutely.
recognizable. There was no luck. But the fact that that school had an opening and would be there for
Absolutely.
you. Yes, there are other factors that may have
Right.
allowed you to step into that experience.
Absolutely. I mean, from if you look at the debate recruitment area. So essentially you have to, in order to get recruited, you have to compete at a district level. So I was competing here in Las Vegas, and I had to qualify for a national tournament. So it's okay, how many rounds of debate, how many rounds of individual events and public speaking that I was competing in order to qualify for the national tournament. And then you do a numerous amount of rounds and those in like the large tournament, the National Forensic League tournament, where kids from all across the country, I mean, what I would think is the best and brightest minds of what America has to offer currently and in the past, it's just incredible. So for me to kind of be able to compete and the whole point of debate is that a person is judging you.
Right.
So a human is looking at what you're saying and what your opponent is saying, and there is a little bit of luck involved in that, because where that judge comes from and where what their political views may or may not be. I mean, they obviously tell you go in with a clean slate, but as humans, we have to categorize things, we box things. And
now, help our listeners. I think I'm correct. For every topic that you present in debate, you must actually be able to argue both sides. Is that?
Absolutely. And that cool? Is the beauty of it. That's why I absolutely adore debate, because it allowed me to study what would technically qualify as Democratic or Republican policy and study and go, what's good about this? What's good about this? What's bad and what's bad? And I was so incredibly informed, which I think is just so crucial, because 70% of the population doesn't even read what's going on in the news.
Well, let's not pick on the whole population. Take me to your circle of friends. Take me to your circle of friends.
My circle of friends, right.
How informed are they generally? In your, you're not a test case of, you're not representative of an entire generation. No. You're representative of someone who did put your interest in learning that skill. Right. Do you have a lot of friends that do that? No friends that do that? What's it like?
I'd say within my friend group, it's kind of split down the middle.
Okay.
Because on one half, you have a large portion of my friends were political science majors from college.
Okay.
So these are individuals who are driven and love to stay involved and aware in what's going on, and not just in politics, just in general, with being informed of what's going on, because eventually the ripple pool of effects, everything touches everything. Right. So I'd say half are everything that's going on with the Panama Papers to the Trans-Pacific Partnership, and then I have another half that's all I care about is Kylie Jenner and her new I'm okay.
So the present life is alive.
Yes. So God bless them, because there should be a multitude of interests, but I'd say it's split down the middle.
And, I would, where do you come out on this? For me, I don't mind that people, are paying attention to things I'm not paying attention to.
Right.
It's when they frame the world. Kylie said, Kylie said we should vote this way. No. Kylie may not have read a book in a while.
Yeah.
Let's not do that.
So I also went to school, and at first my major was political science and communications.
Oh,
and
great.
so I went to American back east, and then I switched over to communications and international service.
Oh, wow.
So I too was in that world. I worked on the Hill, and I did some of that, and it was very interesting. But there is that specific group of people who are just, they live and breathe it.
Right.
Yes.
And that's all they do, and they love it, and they're very passionate about it. And then there are people like the Kardashian people who, of course, we love to hear what they're, just to know what's going on and that they're beautiful and whatever. but that
what Botox parties they went to.
Right, Botox parties. But at Botox parties, you meet interesting people.
That's right.
Look at politics. And,
living, breathing proof.
Right. So I'm fascinated about debate. My daughter's involved in debate.
Oh,
and,
fantastic.
And I think it's an incredible thing for young people to learn both sides of it and not know going in which side you're going to be on.
Now, your daughter's quite young. When was debate introduced to her?
So I sent her to the Claremont McKenna International Debate School.
Oh, wow.
In California, in Claremont. And she loved it. And she had never really been a part of it.
So you chose that as an activity for her initially?
Yes, I chose that for her to do.
Yay.
It was a week in full,
Why, Mama, were you wishing that you could go?
No, actually, I like it, but I don't love it because I feel, but they didn't do political debate. It wasn't Lincoln Douglas,
Right.
Right.
It was more like, should we use animals to dissect live
Right.
animals, or should we use virtual animals? Should we abolish the penny? I mean, these
Right.
were other topics that. But
Yeah.
she then went back.
Non-traumatizing.
Non-addictive trauma, right?
Right.
So then she went back, and then they started it in her school, and now she's at the Meadow School, and she's
Perfect.
in forensics, and she's loving it.
Right.
So, and I hope she does go on to do district and national.
No.
But I think that debate, as from a parent's perspective, it's fantastic. I mean, it's about educating your child on concrete information for and against, and giving them a wide perspective, because there is some people feel so adamant about one side or the other that to learn both sides is really, as a parent, a great education.
Right.
And how to oppose an argument either way.
Right.
Correct.
Absolutely.
And I'll go back again, Kate, to what I observed in the Face the Nation piece. If I remember correctly, you were one of the undecideds.
Correct.
Okay. So what you kept doing was saying there is this side, I can see this side and I can see this side. And I appreciated that you did it in a normal speaking voice.
Oh,
because
thank
I
you.
could actually hear what you were saying. And, I have been personally the most chagrined, and this election cycle only was like on steroids of what I had been observing for
Right.
the last 15 years as social media entered our lives. And it was assumed that it was a mode of communication between young people, but my peers
Right.
started using it. We started using it for business. And so we originally, those of us who were using it and we had to stay on brand.
Right.
So the message was, kept on brand.
Right.
And then I feel we got into a little bit of a blur because brands got louder as young people got into the brands, and then the adults forgot to be adults.
Right.
So observing that this recent cycle of debates was by people who were closer to 70 than not,
Right.
if you had been a judge of these debates, what was your expectation?
Well, I would think when it's two individuals running for the presidency of the United States, I would expect an extreme amount of decorum.
Okay.
And that was so crucial to collegiate debate when you walked in, that there was a sense of respect for one another, and that you would allow that individual to go in, in policy and parliamentary, it's like a card or an advantage or a disadvantage. And you go through and you're able to articulate what you have to say on the card or the advantage and be like, this is why I think, we should pass this policy and the United States federal government should do this. And the individual who you're opposing respects what you have to say and articulately responds to it. And I expect that at a level, just not even in debate, but in life.
Right.
That I think what debate has also taught me is that I have my own opinion,
Right.
and I respect my own opinion. And when other individuals who may have the complete opposite opinion, I'm to respect them too, because that is their right. That is their freedom. And I think that was totally lacking in this debate on both sides. And it was
Yes.
just,
I say there's enough blame to go around in this.
it is. And it from a collegiate debate standpoint, it was like, I wanted to hear, we had claims. We had a lot of claims going back and forth. Well, I want to do this. I want to, help immigration policy. Well, how? I want to see how. And that's,
Right.
I felt like I was just hearing a lot of, fluff.
Right.
Like, okay, well, these are my ideals and these are my ideals. And I'm sitting there going, but how are you going to do them? I want to know, because then I can make an informed decision. And
Right.
it was tough, because if I'm sitting there with the background that I have and I'm having a hard time making a decision, it's just, I'm thinking, what is everybody else doing? How are they getting there? Because this is our future. We're having these two people represent
Right.
our voice, like
Right.
the whole country. And I was just, I have to say, I was a little disappointed.
Okay, so take me back to your friends again.
Mm-hmm.
Within your friend groups, I assume you had friends on all sides of this election. How were the conversations going?
On one half, you have the very passionate, extremely passionate individuals, and just geopolitically where my college was in the Bay Area. So individuals who tend to reside up there are extremely passionate, especially over my school's next to UC Berkeley.
Right.
So I found that people were just so extremely passionate, and it was difficult to kind of penetrate that passion sometimes and be like, okay, I understand, but you can't alienate the other side. and I think Jon Stewart.
Actually, the proof has been yes, you can.
Yeah, yes, you can. Yeah, I mean, you can. Should you?
Yeah, you
no.
can.
And it's unfortunate because Jon Stewart was on I forget which program it was, and he goes, "What I hate Colbert's," and he was saying, "I hate to see the monolith."
Yes.
And he was referring to liberal hypocrisy, but I think it goes across the board, just in general with politics, where people are sitting here going, well, I'm going to group you in with just liberal philosophy, and I'm only going to group you in with conservative policy because you're voting for Trump and you're voting for Hillary.
Right.
And what's unfortunate is some of the most beautiful, inspirational people I know voted for Trump and they voted for Clinton. And it's just, there's been this shift this election cycle where it's like suddenly whoever you're voting for represents you entirely as a person, and that's not what it should be.
Yeah. But I think that goes back to the tone within your friend group.
It was very divided.
Very divided.
Very divided. And people I thought for sure would see through some of the other side's lack of information or lack of, this is how I'm going to do it. It's going to be great. Well, what are you going to do? It's going to be great. I thought, do they really believe that? But they did. They drank the Kool-Aid.
Right.
Yes.
And same with the
But
other
what
side.
Kool-Aid were you drinking? I think is, that's where I've come out. Where's the Kool-Aid that I drank?
Right.
Right.
Well, it's not what we thought it was. Obviously. I mean, and that's the biggest outcome of this whole thing is I think that one side was just knew what they were getting and the other side just didn't want anything to do with that.
Right.
So I think that it was an anti-vote too.
Well, where I'm the most interested in, whereas you did debate, I wasn't introduced to debate until college.
Okay.
I had been given speech. Like in high school, we had speech, but not. At least I wasn't exposed to debate.
Right.
So it was really intriguing for me because the term that I spent doing it, I had to study military spending specifically on veterans.
Oh,
now,
wow.
this was 35 years ago, but admittedly, I had known nothing about that because I came from the Northeast where it wasn't the most natural thing where 18-year-olds went into the military.
Right.
They went to work, but they didn't. Whereas when I moved south, then all of a sudden that was actually a career path. I remember the first time thinking, no one ever said the military was a career path where I grew up. And so that was an interesting aspect of it for me, and where I kept coming out, always going back to the work in positive psychology, and this is what has stunned me so much. It is not the difference of opinion, but the tone to which the opinion is given.
Right.
Okay? In my books, I write about finding your voice. I mean, I am a person who stood up in a Catholic church and asked the priest to stop speaking in the middle of a sermon. I am that person. But you know what? To this moment, I will say that I stood up and just, in a soft voice, repeatedly said, "Father, please stop speaking." And that's what I feel has gotten lost.
Absolutely.
Is the tone that we find acceptable. And what really, got my attention was, let me see, probably 4 or 5 years ago, I was at a Positive Psychology, the international conference, and it was at the rage of big data first coming onto the scene and all the different things that you can find. And they had done an analysis of hateful speech in Twitter feeds and then geographically put where the highest illnesses were. And what it had shown was that the worse the speech, the greater the hate speech, the higher the incidence of heart attack. And that speaks specifically to what positive psychology teaches.
Right.
It teaches that as part of your ability to increase your own positivity, you watch the language you use, because your language does physiologically shift everything within you.
Don't your neurons react to the thoughts
Yes.
that, are processed within your brain?
Everything reacts. And that's been what's so intriguing to me, that so many people have stepped in and are excited by the feeling of excitement
Right.
versus the content of what they're excited about. And now we get to the next part.
Okay.
So here you are, you've made it through school.
Woo!
Although they're 10 years older than me, I'm going to tell you, it was my group who took down, it's the boomers who have taken down the language barrier. It is not, in my opinion, the children or the millennials that have destroyed how we speak to each other.
Right.
It is my group. How would you want it to be different? And what can you do? I know you can still be president.
Thank you.
I know that's possible. Can't be a priest, but you can
No,
be president.
no, not quite.
Right.
So just like in general, or
Yeah, so what are the solutions? Like, knowing where we are, it's always nice to be someplace.
right,
But in positive psychology, everything is based on using the characteristics to help move something positively forward. So no matter,
Right.
you do not deny what the reality is. The reality is it looks pretty darn ugly right now.
right,
We do not know how to speak to each other. I can go on LinkedIn and it looks as bad as Facebook does on any given day of the week. For me, that's not okay. That's not a good direction to take business in, specifically since I came out of the generation of people where we knew that ethics was a critical aspect of leadership.
Right.
And within that, because people spend so much of their time at work,
Right.
far more than they're ever going to be in a synagogue or in a church, we had to up that game.
Right.
We haven't quite done a good job.
Right.
The Enrons of the world, 08 showed us we are failing pretty miserably.
Right.
However, we always have another chance. There is no
Right.
point at which hope is away from us.
absolutely.
What's the hope?
I think the hope is, I think there's an opportunity for my generation to create an initiative to be aware.
Okay.
And by being aware, I think that kind of starts at when you're talking about a social media outlet. I see a lot of like the people that I associate myself with, they're like, there are so many news sites and I don't understand, is this article even true? So it's almost like we have to take that awareness and push forward like an initiative for concrete facts.
I know.
It's tough, and I think also,
But what would that look like? Because I will tell you, and clearly your work with America's Most Wanted,
Right.
you were given tips,
Right.
but you had to discern the difference between...
Right. And usually it was several tips coming in, pooling in a certain area that gave validity to whoever we were trying to find. So, and it was also information that we already had, and we didn't always give out or disseminate all the information, knowing that if someone called with a specific tattoo or background information, I knew that was my person.
Okay.
right.
So we always kept a little bit off the television.
Right.
And
Right.
and that's how we
And
disseminated.
and I had a really cool job when I was 18, 19 years old. I worked for a huge multinational corporation. And I was charged with reading every journal that was in our particular industry within our division. And at the end of the week, I had to write a short synopsis, no more than 5 sentences, for each article. And I learned to discern that when an article said that, and at that time it would have been all male executives, were retiring to go pursue a different interest, we would then know that person had been fired.
Okay.
Okay, because if there was no thing they were going to do, they weren't going to another company.
Right. It was
And
a nice way of saying it.
So then the next thing, and the reason that was important information and to discern it that way, is that industry in trouble? Is that company in trouble? Is there a reason why that person's been
Right.
let go? And you would be able to discern that from reading an article.
Right.
And, you knew the difference between what the press was saying and how they were couching something, and then what that was like press speak for.
Right.
And then you would do additional research. I know going back as many as 15 years, sites like Truth or Fiction started coming up because, everyone was getting their letters that some Nigerian was going to make us rich. And you wanted to rush to the site. Is this a real one? Is this one really going to make me rich?
No,
And
it wasn't.
No, it was not. But sites did start. So clearly in the last several weeks, there has been this huge call for accurate information and how we respond when we're given information
Right.
that is not accurate.
Correct.
Right. What does it look like? Like, what does that responsibility look like?
I think ultimately for myself, because I really can only speak for myself. So when I'm reading any sort of information, I always double check everything.
Yes.
Fact check.
Fact check. I really like when I read something, like whether if it's in a book or if it's online, I'm like, and maybe it's just my inquisitive nature where I'm like, well, I want to learn a little bit more about this. And so I think there's a responsibility as, an American or as
As a person.
whatever you identify as a person.
yeah.
Like I feel that there is a need to go and double check anything you read, especially if it's online. And I think that's the responsibility there.
I had a great thing happen over the weekend. My husband was telling me that he read some article about a mastiff, a dog, that had grown to X amount of size. And he's telling me this story, and I'm like, hun, are you sure it wasn't in the category after you made it through the Wall Street Journal article? There wasn't this section that said sponsored,
Right.
And that's what's interesting, being able to see all of these little things
Right.
that we're not catching. And it's annoying. Like, why would I want to spend my time having to discern whether or not something's truthful?
I agree.
And I think that, like, yes, we need to take that step, but wouldn't it be lovely if we didn't have to?
If we didn't.
Well, I
have
think
to.
I think the news was that fact check step for us for so long, and when Brian Williams was let go because he had
Right.
exaggerated that
Right,
information.
right.
I think people second guessed our media. The journalists and media.
Right.
Are they telling the story? And we found out that they weren't. He was exaggerating. So our trust for our news broadcasters changed.
Right.
And I
Right.
think that was across the board for all the news industries. And I think that left us with the question, can we trust these people? And especially with your debate background, of course you double check five
Right.
different sources. My daughter
right.
does the same. She doesn't trust any one source. She double checks multiple sources to confirm.
So, that really goes to the quality of speaking your voice and finding it, that you aren't allowing others. It would be lovely. Gone is that time where we can assume that something that's been told to us, which generationally had very much been, if
Right.
it was in this source, it meant this. If this person said that, you knew those were definite. And it may be an enormous benefit that, in fact, we're being called to up our own personal gains.
Right.
Not to be sheep led by anyone, but to be able to contribute to a conversation in a very different level because we have, actually done some thought. I had a situation, and do not think I'm totally weird. Do not. Okay, so get ready. So many times when I dream, and I'm not a daily dreamer, but sometimes when I dream, songs will come into my mind.
Oh, fun.
Yeah, okay. And so for whatever the reason in the last month, the Pledge of Allegiance came into my mind.
Interesting.
Okay, that's what I thought too. And I woke up because what was bothering me was I was stuck on one of the words, and I was annoyed in my sleep that I didn't know the words to the Pledge of Allegiance.
What is it?
That's exactly right. You know, it is not good when you're having dreams and you're annoyed at yourself. That's its own message. I am sure Jung would have an entire reason when you're annoyed at yourself in your own dreams. But what I did when I got up in the morning, I checked to make sure I knew.
What was the word?
Yeah.
Well, I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America, to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God. Well, what had happened was I was stuck somewhere around the republic.
Oh, so the United
nation.
States is a republic.
Yes.
It is not a democracy. It is
Correct.
a republic.
Correct, correct.
That's
Now, here
correct.
was the interesting thing that I found out, that because I was born in 1955,
Okay.
in 1954, the words God were added to the Pledge of Allegiance. It had never been there before. So it led me to wonder, why then?
Yeah. Why then?
Well, the 4 years prior to that was the era of McCarthyism in our country.
That's why.
Okay? So I just stood there and I said, wow, in business, I would teach, how we get used to patterns with this silly little story about how a woman kept trying to get her ham into the oven and was always cutting the ham and putting it into two separate pans, yet she had this new beautiful Wolf oven that clearly didn't need her to cut anything. So she went to her mother and asked, Mom, why do we cut the ham in half? And the mom said, well, because that's the way Grandma did it. And then we go to Grandma, why do we cut the ham in half?
Right.
Because my oven was so small I couldn't fit the whole ham in it. And I think lovingly we have to take responsibility for finding out where our hams get cut.
Right. Absolutely.
And you had started in a private conversation telling us about how coddled this generation that you're raising, that you're responsible for raising. It's all your fault.
But it's true. My daughter's generation is a very sensitive, coddled, bubble-like, protected generation, and I'm worried about her.
Right. So how do we break through the bubble?
That's the big
That's
question.
and I think that's what this is sitting with. We have a lot to go through in the next number of years as we find ways, because I did start having meetings in my home to specifically, I was so frustrated with the debates. If I want to be amused, I can be amused. They were amusing, but I was really unsure about where jobs are going to come from. What will the finance laws look like? There were a lot of things that I deeply cared about. And I initially invited all people. And what happened was, as the election got closer and it appeared that actually the Democratic nominee was going to win, many who had opposing either very, very left of center, who would have been even left of Bernie, or those that were quite right or voting their Republican ticket, they stopped coming to the conversations, and I felt horrible about it because I knew there was no yelling and screaming, because the whole invitation was to learn to civilly disagree. And I know that comes because I know what agitation does to the psyche. And if we take no other responsibility for how we go forward, do no harm to yourself. And what would it be like for us to live in that world?
Right.
So, look into the camera. Give us one moment of hope. One moment of hope.
One moment of hope.
Yes.
Well, I think the fantastic thing about the millennial generation, so I only speak for myself, and from what I've learned and what I've experienced, but I really and truly believe that we recognize the flaws in this last election cycle and where everything is kind of headed, whether, it's from finance, like our economy, to jobs. We're aware. And the wonderful thing is I think we're going to make a difference. Like, there is, like you were speaking about earlier, is that what is the meaning?
Right.
And so when the millennials are having that in mind, like any job we go into or any like relationship we have with another individual, it's what does this mean? And when you ask yourself that question, you're able to look at yourself and your strengths and your weaknesses, and how do we move forward? How do I make myself better as a person? I know that's something that I find conversations, like even at the bar, I'm like, what am I doing with my life?
Right.
And when and what's great is I was actually at a Friendsgiving this weekend, and every person there was between the age of 20 to 35.
Okay.
And we were all discussing, like, what does this mean for us?
Right.
And what does this mean for our future and the policies that are going to get put in place? And there was so much passion and there was so much awareness to be like, guys, we have to do something. We have to fix this. We have to make sure we fix the problems that are in place right now. So we need to, you know, whether it's politics or, you know, even at your local level, like, I need to try hard. And it was this moment where I kind of went, oh, thank God, you know, because
Time to get busy if you want to be
let's
president.
go. And it was this moment for me that actually created hope, because I feel throughout this whole election I've just had this sense of fear.
Yes.
And I think in the Hunger Games there's a quote that says, hope is the only feeling that is greater than fear. Correct. So when I'm sitting there at this table and everybody had brought something, whether it was a pie, you know, a dish that they had grown up with, and everyone was bringing something to the table, and I really think that my generation is going to sit down and look at each other and go, what do we have to bring to the table?
Right.
How can we keep America the greatest country in the world?
Right.
You know, and so I really and truly believe that we have the capacity to do that. I really do.
Okay.
I hope so.
And would you like to add something?
No, I think that's a perfect ending to this conversation, is that I love that everybody is bringing something from their own background, that we can come together as a country with your traditions and with your thoughts and with your upbringing and political views, and make it a better place to live. Because, you know, I that makes me hopeful for my daughter, because this is the most outrageous election I've ever been a part of, and you know, I see my daughter's fear, and I'm so happy that the generation above her, thank goodness, has hope, because that gives me hope for her. So thank you.
Thank you.
Great story.
Yeah, and I want to conclude with just tying some of the things together, and it specifically speaks to hope. Where there is hope, you then know that you can then take some action, and that's what I would employ all of us to do. Hope will die if you don't, no matter how you believe, begin to put one foot in front of the other. So whether it's a career that you're going after, whether there's something locally you'd like to see different, whether it's at a more national level, do not give up hope. Just put your hope in a form that it takes action.
Right.
And thank you. It's been
Thank you.
an absolute delight. I
Thank
look
you.
forward to our next
Thank
party
you.
over cocktail. Thank you. And I wish everyone well. I generally don't like to date these tapes, but this particular one, because we are in the week of Thanksgiving, I would like to ask all of us to pause and really give thanks, particularly to the family members that you may have that you have been the most at odds with, because they have taught you something about yourself. And as you enjoy your holiday, think about that, not what it is about them that caused the problem, but what you have taken the time to learn about yourself. And go forward and conquer. Thank you.